Attorney General ultimately owes his loyalty to the integrity of the American people and to the fidelity to the Constitution and the legitimate laws of the country. That's what he's ultimately required to do.
I will be an independent Attorney General. I will be the people's lawyer. If, however, there were an issue that I thought were that significant that would compromise my ability to serve as Attorney General in the way that I have described, that as the people's lawyer, I would not hesitate to resign.
As you and I discussed, if the President proposed to undertake a course of conduct that was in violation of the Constitution, that would present me with a difficult but not a complex problem. I would have two choices. I could either try to talk him out of it or leave. Those are the choices.
The Attorney General's position as a cabinet member is perhaps unique from all of the cabinet members. Yes, a member of the President's cabinet, but the Attorney General has a unique responsibility to provide independent and objective advice to the President or any agency when it is sought, and sometimes perhaps even when it is not sought.
Everyone in that video, from Eric Holder to Jeff Sessions, spoke as one about the independence of the department. It's a point of pride at Justice to apply the law without the President's political self-interest tainting its actions or dictating how it uses its authorities. But President Trump did find one candidate at Justice who seemed willing to do anything to help him stay in power. Let's hear what President Trump's own lawyer, Eric Hirschman, had to say about Jeff Clark's plan to overturn the election. I'd like to advise viewers this video contains some strong language.
And when he finished discussing what he planned on doing, I said, good fucking, a-hole. Congratulations, you just admitted the first step in your act you take as Attorney General would be committing a felony and violating Rule 6C. You're clearly the right candidate for this job.
So who's Jeff Clark? An environmental lawyer with no experience relevant to leading the entire Department of Justice. What was his only qualification? That he would do whatever the President wanted him to do, including overthrowing a free and a fair democratic election.
Yes, so obviously it was a bit of a scramble that afternoon to prepare for the Oval Office meeting. We had discussed on several occasions, the Acting Attorney General and I, whether we should expand the circle of people who knew what was going on. It was very important that Steve Engel know, and that's why I reached out to Steve on December 28th, because if Mr. Rosen were removed from the seat and the President did not immediately appoint someone else to serve as Attorney General, just by function of the department's chain of succession, Mr. Engel would be in the seat. We wanted to make sure he knew what was going on should that occur. So the three of us knew. We also brought Pat Hovakimian in, so the four of us knew. But no one else, aside from Jeff Clark, of course, knew what was going on until late that Sunday afternoon. We chose to keep a close hold because we didn't want to create concern or panic in the Justice Department leadership. But at this point, I asked the acting AG, what else can I do to help prepare for this meeting at the Oval Office? And he said, you and Pat should get the AAGs on the phone, and it's time to let them know what's going on. Let's find out what they may do if there's a change in leadership, because that will help inform the conversation at the Oval Office. Pat Hovakimian subsequently set up that meeting. We got most, not all, but most of the AAGs on the phone. We very quickly explained to them what the situation was. I told them, I don't need an answer from you right now. I don't need an answer in this phone call, but if you have an answer, I need it in the next few minutes. So call me, email me, text me, whatever it is, if you know what you would do if Jeff Clark is put in charge of the department. And immediately Eric Dryben, who was the AAG of the Civil Rights Division, said, I don't need to think about it. There's no way I'm staying. And then the other AAGs began to chime in turn, and all essentially said they would leave. They would resign en masse if the President made that change.
President Trump's campaign to bend the Justice Department to his political will culminated in a showdown on January 3rd. Today, we will take you inside that early evening Oval Office meeting, where top Justice Department officials met with the President. At stake, the leadership and integrity of the Department of Justice.
early on, the president said, "What do I have to lose?" And it was actually a good opening because I said, "Mr. President, you have a great deal to lose." And I began to explain to him what he had to lose, and what the country had to lose, and what the department had to lose. And this was not in anyone's best interest. That conversation went on for some time. Everyone essentially chimed in with their own thoughts, all of which were consistent about how damaging this would be to the country, to the department, to the administration, to him personally. And at some point, the conversation turned to whether Jeff Clark was even qualified, competent to run the Justice Department, which in my mind, he clearly was not. And it was a heated conversation. I thought it was useful to point out to the president that Jeff Clark simply didn't have the skills, the ability, and the experience to run the department. And so I said, "Mr. President, you're talking about putting a man in that seat who has never tried a criminal case, who's never conducted a criminal investigation. He's telling you that he's going to take charge of the department, 115,000 employees, including the entire FBI, and turn the place on a dime and conduct nationwide criminal investigations that will produce results in a matter of days. It's impossible, it's absurd, it's not going to happen, and it's going to fail."
The meeting took about another 2.5 hours from the time I entered. It was entirely focused on whether there should be a DOJ leadership change. I was sitting directly in front of the president. Jeff Rosen was to my right, Jeff Clark was to my left.
And he said, "Well, one thing we know is you, Rosen, you aren't going to do anything. You don't even agree with the claims of election fraud. And this other guy at least might do something." And then I said, "Well, Mr. President, you're right, but the reason for that is because that's what's consistent with the facts and the law, and that's what's required under the Constitution. So that's the right answer and a good thing for the country, and therefore I submit it's the right thing for you, Mr. President." And that kicked off another 2 hours of discussion in which everyone in the room was in one way or another making different points, but supportive of my approach for the Justice Department and critical of Mr. Clark.
Jeff Clark was proposing that Jeff Rosen be replaced by Jeff Clark. And I thought the proposal was asinine.
What were Clark's purported bases for why it was in the president's interest for him to step in? What would he do? How would things change, according to Mr. Clark in the meeting?
He repeatedly said to the president that if he was put in the seat, he would conduct real investigations that would, in his view, uncover widespread fraud. He would send out the letter that he had drafted, and that this was a last opportunity to sort of set things straight with this defective election, and that he could do it, and he had the intelligence and the will and the desire to pursue these matters in the way that the president thought most appropriate.
And he was making a pitch, and every time he would get clobbered over the head, he would say, like a call to order, the president's your decision, you get the chance to make this decision, and you've heard everybody and you can make your determination. And then we jump back in and really clobber him.
I made the point that Jeff Clark is not even competent to serve as the Attorney General. He's never been a criminal attorney. He's never conducted a criminal investigation in his life. He's never been in front of a grand jury, much less a trial jury. And he kind of retorted by saying, "Well, I've done a lot of very complicated appeals and civil litigation, environmental litigation, and things like that." And I said, "That's right, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill." And Pat Cipollone weighed in at one point, I remember saying, that letter that this guy wants to send, that letter is a murder-suicide pact. It's going to damage everyone who touches it. And we should have nothing to do with that letter. I don't ever want to see that letter again. And so we went along those lines.
I thought Jeff's proposal, Clark's proposal, was nuts. I mean, this guy said, at a certain point, listen, the best I can tell is the only thing you know about environmental and elections challenges is they both start with E. And based on your answer tonight, I'm not even certain you know that.
Toward the end of the meeting, the president, again, was getting very agitated, and he said, people tell me I should just get rid of both of you. I should just remove you and make a change in leadership, put Jeff Clark in, maybe something will finally get done. And I responded, as I think I had earlier in the December 27th call, Mr. President, you should have the leadership that you want, but understand, the United States Justice Department functions on facts, evidence, and law, and those are not going to change.
But think about what happens if these justice officials make a different decision. What happens if they bow to the pressure? What would that do to us as a democracy, as a nation? Imagine a future where the president could screen applicants to the Justice Department with one question. Are you loyal to me or to the Constitution? And it wouldn't take long to find people willing to pledge their loyalty to the man. We know many of President Trump's vocal supporters on January 6th also wanted the Justice Department to do whatever he asked, as long as it meant he could stay in power. They made sure Justice Department officials heard his message as they protested loudly in front of the department on their way to the Capitol on January 6th.
Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job!
Live in D.C., we're marching to the Capitol. We are at the Department of Justice right now telling these cowards to do their job. We're going to take the Capitol.
I want to take a moment now to speak directly to my fellow Republicans. Imagine the country's top prosecutor with the power to open investigations, subpoena, charge crimes, and seek imprisonment. Imagine that official pursuing the agenda of the other party instead of that of the American people as a whole.